Hello, Romantics. I'm Sarah Gomez, author, romance lover, and host. You're listening to Romancing the Story, a podcast centered around writing, reading, and story structure, all with a twist of romance. We're at episode number 20, and today we're talking to romance author E.L. Lewis. And we talk about her journey from Wattpad star to published romance author. A couple of quick updates regarding the podcast. I have a couple of more episodes lined up for next month, including a special drop that I haven't even announced yet. I just need to time it right with my guest. I also hope to have a website launched here within the next 2 months. So fingers crossed on that. I will have to ask a little bit of forgiveness from you guys regarding the episode, because you'll hear a little bit of feedback right in the beginning for the first 7 minutes, but then it clears up pretty quickly. With that said, let's jump right into the interview. We have two very special guests on the episode. Welcome romance author and Wattpad star E.L. Lewis.
Hi, everyone.
And Vanessa Holden, manager of the English-speaking markets at Cherry Publishing.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here.
Good. We're talking mostly with Liza today, but if we play our cards right, we might get a little more insight into Cherry Publishing with Vanessa. So, ladies, I do have to say up front, today is a landmark episode. It is the first episode where we managed to coordinate 3 different time zones. So,
we are living in 2022 here, folks.
That is true. So it is, I mean, I'm proud of us. So
I am too.
It's a momentous occasion. So Liza, you're a Wattpad star, and you also have 3 published romance novels with Cherry Publishing.
It's a bit crazy. A couple of years ago, I did not think that this was going to happen at all. Like, being published was definitely much of a pipe dream, let alone being a Wattpad star and Wattpad Tape Stories. So everything has been surreal leading up into this moment. And I'm really happy to be on this show today to just talk about that a little bit.
So tell us a little bit of yourself as a romance author. Did you always want to be a writer? Was that always something you had in your mind to do? Or do you actually own any of those fabulous wardrobe pieces you mentioned in your series?
Oh my God, Manolo Blahniks, girl, I wish. Come on. I'm like Cassie. I'm actually good with my money. So no. One day though, hopefully. In terms of my journey as a romance author, so I wrote a little bit in high school in creative writing, and I remember my teacher told me I had a forte in creative writing. That's probably one of the only things I remember a high school teacher telling me, because everything else I don't know. But I actually recently found my book from grade 12, my senior year, and on my bucket list it said write a novel, which was really exciting because I'm 28 now, and that was like 10 years ago. So little 18-year-old Liza had apparently a dream that I ignored for 10 years. And then, then COVID happened. So I dabbled a little bit in writing here and there, nothing too crazy. At this point, I had ordered so many crafts to make off of Amazon that it was like a week into making bracelets for all my friends. Which, after a while gets really tedious, and you poke yourself with a little string. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to browse my laptop that I haven't opened in forever, because that's something fun to do. Nothing else, can't go outside. And then I found this Word document with a couple of paragraphs written for a story that's actually on Wattpad right now. It's the first one that I finished writing on there. It's called Against the Odds. And I read it, and I thought to myself, okay, this is not like horrible. I probably wrote this when I was 17, 18. There was nothing else to do, so I figured, like, hey, maybe I'll just continue writing this. Why not? And then I shared it with my coworkers and my friends, and they were all quite encouraging. And I thought, okay, how do I share this with other people? So I Googled, and I found Wattpad, and I just started posting on there. And then it started ranking really well, and I made friends, and then I wrote The Asher Complex, and then I wrote Company Inc. and Permanent Inc. And then the powers that be brought forth the great Cherry Publishing into my DMs. And here we are today with 3 published books. So, and that's kind of how I got where I am today. Romance for sure was a genre that I only read romance books. I only really watch those that have romance story arcs in them, or rom-coms. Like anything that doesn't have romance in it, it's not up my avenue whatsoever. So it seemed like good.
So like I find like a lot of people really find romance as a kind of an outlet. So I love that you kind of utilize that kind of during the pandemic. Like that's a great way to kind of I think people more got into writing actually during the pandemic. And how great was it that 2 years later you're a published author?
Yeah,
Awesome.
for sure. It was insane. And Company Inc. was definitely, even though I wrote like 2 other books prior to that, Company Inc. was my baby. It was the easiest for me to write. Cassie just came so naturally to me. Like she's probably one of the only characters that our personalities are quite similar. Granted, I'm a little bit more responsible than her and hopefully mature. She's a little bit younger than me, but maybe when I was 25, very much the same kind of person. And Company Inc. and Permanent Inc. took me in total, those 2 books, maybe like 2.5 months to write. And so that's like 250,000 words. Yeah, it was just, I can go hours just Cassie and Adrian and Blake, and it was just so fun for me. So people often ask me which one is my favorite book that I've written, and I always like hands down Company Inc. It was so fun, so easy, 0 breakdowns. If you don't, which is always such a beautiful thing for a writer. If you don't cry while you write, we all cry, except for Company Inc.
That, I mean, like, what did that writing process look like? Because that's very impressive. 2.5 months. Like you could get that all down 250,000 words. That's incredible.
Yeah. The writing process is chaotic because I am not a plotter. I'm a pantser. So I had a general idea of what I wanted to write about. Actually, the entire book stemmed from the title because I thought Company Inc. What an awesome name. Like, don't dip your pen into the Company Inc. Okay, office romance. We got this. And then I started thinking, okay, so she's gonna have to work in an office. There's gonna be a love interest. And then I was writing a log line for it just to get to get the neurons firing in my brain. And suddenly there was not 1 love interest, there was 2. And I was so excited. I was like, this is so exciting. I can't wait to read this. And I thought, oh crap, I have to write it. So I had the bones of the story, and I knew that there was going to be Adrian and there was going to be Blake, and they were both going to complement Cassie in different ways and bring out different sides of her. And a fun tidbit is that I did not know who she was going to end up with until like the last chapter that I was writing, and the last couple of chapters, wherever. So it's quite hilarious. Because people always comment on that. They're like, we don't, who is it? Is it Blake? Is it Adrian? And the reason you don't know is because I swear I did not know either. Because it could have gone very much both directions. But obviously in Permanent, we do find out who she ends up with, and it's definitely a whiplash of a book.
Well, and I felt that wavering a little bit because I was just like, I mean, I felt the same way as a reader, like really engrossing myself into it. I was like, this is such an interesting love triangle because there's usually a clear winner going into it, exactly, but they were both such strong candidates and she both had chemistry with both in different ways. I was like, I have no clue. And I am so intrigued by this.
Yeah. Girl, I had no clue either. That's why it's so intriguing, apparently, because I had my outline for it, and at the end, it's like the resolute, like the 3-act structure, the resolution. I just had a big old question mark there. So And like I was posting on Wattpad as I was writing, and it was nice to see reader reactions because they were also confused. And I was trying to suss out who they liked more, but it was always 50-50, which makes sense because Adrian and Blake are very different personality types. And like all my friends that are more introverted prefer Blake, and all my friends that are like more extroverted always preferred Adrian. And Cassie's an extrovert, but she also meshed super well with Blake. So it was they were helpful, but at the same time a little bit useless in terms of deciding the path of that story.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up actually, because that's super interesting to me. In previous episodes, I had actually talked a bit about writing fan fiction and original stories on community sites like AO3 or Wattpad and places like that. I remember writing for like serialized fan fiction stories, and it has a very special place in my heart. Having that instant feedback from readers really has shaped me as a writer and helped shape the story. So is that what you found? Like kind of being that a Wattpad author and then posting those stories, did it kind of shape how you write and you as a writer?
Oh, 100%. So the community on Wattpad is super supportive and encouraging, and the readers there are fantastic, and the ones that comment really do help you carry the story, continue writing it. I've never actually written anything without posting on Wattpad, so I don't even have that experience of completing an entire manuscript offline before letting someone read it. I always do chapter by chapter, instant feedback. And at the same time, obviously it's like a little bit like instant gratification because you have like, like a few fans who are like, oh my God, this is amazing. And you're like, I am amazing. And if you think you're amazing, you want to keep writing, right? Because I would assume if you're writing by yourself at your computer and you don't have, the voices telling you like, you're a rock star, you go girl. It's a little bit more difficult, I would think. So
well, imposter syndrome is a real thing, right?
Oh, 110%. And granted, obviously, when you post on websites where anyone can read it and anyone can comment, it's not necessarily always going to be positive feedback. At the same time, once if you blow up a bit or you get more than the initial core group of people that are there, that are your little supporters, you do have the mean folks in the back there. But I try to ignore those as much as I can. But in terms of reader comments and everything, I have used, because usually I'll post something at the end, and like an author's note, and I'll ask predictions, thoughts, and sometimes people will predict things that I didn't even think were going to happen. And I was like, oh, that's an excellent idea. I shall carry on. And so their feedback and comments definitely get slipped into the storyline at some point, which is always really exciting.
Yeah, I find it so fascinating to me how like a lot of times readers or even beta readers or even friends like I've shared works with or they've shared works with me as well. Like I'll say like, I feel like you're laying the groundwork for this thing to happen, or I feel like it's like you're setting it up to pay this off later for this big reveal. And they're like, I did not do that on purpose, but yes, I will.
Exactly.
Right? How we subconsciously, we subconsciously write it and then the readers catch on to it.
Yeah, I think I do that quite a bit in a lot of my stories where like I'll leave a breadcrumb. It's so small that if I don't go back and retrieve it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the plot so much. But obviously, as you write, you could be like, okay, well, in chapter 1, I had this one sentence that people are gonna go crazy for. I did that a few times with my recent book published with Cherry, For Real. And the epilogue, everyone was definitely stunned and shocked, and I was sitting here on my couch like, I left so many crumbs and nobody noticed.
Yeah, it's like very Taylor Swift of you, leaving like all those little breadcrumbs for later
Easter
on.
eggs.
Yeah.
A I love Taylor Swift. She's my favorite. So
I know. And I love, I love finding Easter eggs too. And a lot of times as readers will pick up on that. I love that. That just warms my heart. I think that's part of my love language.
Yeah.
But writing for a published, as your published novels,
is it at all different, or have you found it to be any different than writing for like an online community like Wattpad or anything like that? I know you said you post your stories still on Wattpad,
Yeah.
but have you found the process to be any different?
When I work with Cherry, it's a pretty seamless transition from the chapters I post on Wattpad versus what's published. Obviously, everything is a bit tightened up, it's cleaner. Our wonderful proofreader Stuart has to go through and fix all my spelling mistakes and the fact that I don't use an M dash. I have started to, Vanessa. By the way, I'm letting you know. I have, yes, I know. It's not just the little tiny dash. I copy and paste. I have it on the little sticky note. They should really have that symbol as a key on a keyboard. Why is it so difficult to get? Anyways, mini rant. But it's pretty, it was very easy. It wasn't complicated. Vanessa's great to work with, and anything that needed editing or just taken away or added, or any plot points or character developments, we worked together as a team to kind of tackle those. So it was definitely not stressful. And the stuff that I post on Wattpad is pretty edited already. It's not, I don't write, I write offline, and then I'll read my chapter, I'll edit my chapter, and then that's when it goes on Wattpad. So it's not like, it's a first draft, I suppose, but it's not directly written on the platform. So there's a bit of due diligence that goes into what I do post on Wattpad. But yeah, it's in terms of content, I think it's pretty similar.
That's really interesting to know. And so we have mentioned your books are currently published with Cherry Publishing, an indie publisher who specializes in romance. As you started your writing journey, you said Cherry actually sought you out. Is that correct?
Yeah. They slid into my DMs, which it's very 2020 of them to do.
Very fancy.
I thought it was like a scam at first. I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, this is not real, or these people are crazy. And then turned out they had a website, they had books. I think they just started the English market at that point. I think this was a couple of years ago. So they have like a separate, it's still Cherry Publishing, but it's in France. And I think they have a larger portfolio of books there. So it was quite exciting to be like one of the first few authors that got to sign with Cherry Publishing English. And the woman that I work with, she's no longer with Cherry, but she was fantastic, and she walked me through all the steps and the contracts. I had so many questions, but it was so exciting, and the fact that it was Company Inc. that they wanted, which was my baby, and I think I was so eager. I was like, "You guys want Permanent Ink too? Like, can we sign a contract for that as well? Like, is that going to be published too?" And yeah, I think for an entire month, everyone I met, I was like, "Hi, I'm Liza. I'm getting published." So it was definitely a ray of sunshine on an otherwise very COVID time.
Yes. No, that's a huge flex. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
That, like I said, within 2 years, that's incredible. And
Yeah.
so was Company Inc. already out there in the ether when they approached you? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was, I think I had just completed it, or I think I was already working on Permanent Ink, or maybe even Permanent Ink was done at that time. And it was getting pretty good traction on Wattpad. I think right now it has a little under 500,000 reads on it before it got published. So the readership base was there, and they were all so excited when I announced that it was going to be published. You could have a physical copy of the book, and that, all the M dashes were going to be in there properly. So people were thrilled. Yeah, it was a very, very good year. It was a very good month. I was very honored that they would choose me.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And for anyone who doesn't know, I'll just mention this real quick. The Company Inc. And Permanent Ink are part of that Ink series, I believe. Is that what it's called? Okay. Yeah. And it's more like office romance. I read it. Incredible. Loved it. Gave me very Sex in the City vibes. I loved it. Every minute of it. So is that what you kind of found? Did you find inspiration for it? for that, or did you
Totally.
kind
I
of okay?
binge watched Sex in the City, I think like a few months before I started writing it. And I was like, this vibe I love. So I'll write it.
Yeah, translated. I completely saw that, because that was exactly what I thought when I was kind of reading through it. You kind of made a little reference to it, but I was just like, but it does feel like Sex in the City. And I kind
Yeah.
of I loved every moment of that.
Thanks. It was like a Sex in the City, like millennial take on Sex in the City where, you want all these things, but you can't afford it and your life is not put together. I think it was a little like a realistic approach to someone in their like early to mid 20s trying to take on the big city. Well, it's Seattle, but big enough.
Well, and did you always think that that was the one you wanted to publish? Like that series in particular, you really, really wanted to publish and get in your
Yeah.
hands and everything, because there was something about a physical book.
Oh, for sure. Well, the first two that I wrote on Wattpad, Against the Odds and the Asher Complex, they're cute, they're sweet, but obviously as your first works, it's kind of it's that imposter syndrome where you're like,
Mm.
okay, well, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't really know formatting and you were still like discovering your style as a writer. Whereas Company Inc., I think I really came into my own as a writer, and it was just very easy for me to write. Um, and yeah, I'm definitely glad that the Ink series is published, and I have it on my bookshelf, and I can look at it whenever I'm feeling sad and be like, you know what, your hair doesn't look good, but you have a book, so we're gonna smile today. Um,
Love
yeah,
that. So you also wrote your latest release, Faux Real, is also with Cherry Publishing.
yeah.
So was that something you said, like, okay, this is another story I want to put out and I want to make sure is published, because it's a little different venture. It is YA, still with that romance element, but
Boy, yeah, YA, I tell you, boy, oh boy. So you know how like I said, Company Inc. took me like 2.5 months to write the entire series.
Mhm.
For Real took me almost an entire year with many breaks, many breaks, because oh my God, teenagers are hard to write. Oh, I'm not a teenager, and you have to, I think the issues teens face, at least even thinking back when I was in grade 11 or grade 12, it's not just fluffy and fun and flirty. There's serious issues that happen in high school, and I wanted to touch on those, and I wanted to touch on them carefully, and I wanted to make sure that my characters, especially when you're 17, it's not, oh, I met a boy and suddenly my life is all perfect, right? Or all of
Mhm.
my problems have gone away. Or even for all of, it's dual POV. So even for Oliver, it's not like, oh, there's a girl in my life and suddenly I'm doing fantastic. I had to kind of show their own separate journeys as individuals while they're also helping each other grow and see that they have potential outside what their parents have told them or outside what society has told them. So it was a lot of it's a sweet romance when you read it, but in the background as the writer, I had to put a lot of elements into it and tackling subjects that I knew were going to be difficult. I've gotten comments on For Real where there's elements of like slut shaming in there, which is obviously horrible, but it happens, right? It's to write a protagonist that partakes in something like that, they're like, well, she shouldn't do that, but I'm like, but that's high school, right? That's how it is. Like you can be a good person, you can be a good character, you can grow throughout the book, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be influenced by how it always has happened. So that was like a touchy subject that I wanted to approach carefully and with thought, so I think it came across well, hopefully. The feedback has been pretty good. And I mean, teenage girls are brutal. I remember being a teenage girl and there was a claws out. As Oliver says at some point, he's like, they go straight for the jugular, which is very, very true. So I will not probably write another YA, at least not for
Mhm.
the foreseeable future. I will stick to my grown-ups, a little bit easier for me, not as much crying involved, but that story has a very, very big place in my heart. They're just I feel like they're like my niece and nephew almost, my my little beans is what I call them.
Oh.
So fun to see them grow up. Yeah.
Well, and you did an excellent job of capturing kind of that peer pressure, right? That peer pressure element and all the kind of external, because I agree. Why is so hard to write? I've kind of like I've tried my foray into it, and I know several friends who have done it, and they said it is brutal the writing process,
Yeah.
just because it takes a lot out of you. Where romance, I think, is more intrinsic as far as between the characters, right? I feel like it's more external in some ways for teenagers, because that you got to think of peer pressure and their situation, because it's all about looks, it's all about the, how others view them. So
Yeah.
you did a fantastic job of capturing that. And so did the process of that writing, were did you look into any research? Did you pull more from your own experiences when you were like kind of fighting through like that year of trying to write it?
Yeah. I definitely pulled from my own experiences and just reflecting on some of the journeys my friends had when we were in high school together, and obviously from other YA books or teen movies. There's like certain tropes that obviously happen that you can touch on, but I wanted there to be a sense of authenticity as well with these characters. And they don't always do the right thing, they don't always say the right thing or make the right choices, but that's how it is. And I know it angers some folks that it's not just love and happiness and like he likes you, she likes, and he likes her, like why can't you be together? And that's just not how life works, and that's not how romance books work, because we make
Right.
you go through a lot of pain. I For Real is a very, very, very slow burn. um so for the slow burn lovers out there, you'll adore this hopefully, but it definitely took a while for Kennedy and Oliver to get their ducks in a row, for them to be in a place where they can accept a relationship, but first they have to accept themselves. I think that's what I was going for.
Well, and you did a great job. Yeah, because they feel like real characters. That's always kind of
Oh,
my,
thank
yeah,
you.
absolutely. It's always what I look for in a book is like, do these characters feel real to me? Right.
Yeah.
They don't feel like a caricature or just like someone, or just like a Mary Jane or anything like that, kind of just put in the book. And they did feel real and authentic, like you said. And did so I do ask occasionally too, do you have any methods of like getting through a writer's block? I know everyone has different methods. So when you were kind of stuck on those, did you just kind of like you said, like read a little bit of a book or just kind of like journal or anything like that?
So my response to when people ask me how do I treat writer's block, I say that I cry, and that's the honest truth, because going on a walk doesn't help, reading doesn't help. I cry and then I power through. I
Mm,
cry and then I write something. I write a sentence, or and then if I delete it, but as long as I'm writing. So I guess continue writing is the advice, but crying also really does help people. Okay, it's very cathartic.
it is. It can be very cathartic. I completely agree with you on that. It sounds terrible of me, but sometimes I'll just watch certain movies or certain videos where I know I'll get a good cry. And I'm just like, and then afterwards, I feel so much better. It feels cathartic.
Exactly, right? I'm like, hey, I'm done with feeling sorry for myself. Now I'm gonna sit
Exactly.
down and write. I'm like, I had my moment. It's over now. We're moving on. Also, dual POV kills me as a writer.
Mm,
It's just so it's some people do it so easily, and every single, even like on Wattpad, it's very popular. People love dual POVs. They want to know what everyone's thinking. Um, and for For Real, it just made sense to have a dual POV because it was both of their journeys kind of combining into one destination at the end. But oh my gosh, being in the mind of a 17-year-old boy who's British, I'm a girl from Canada, very hard. It was great to have Vanessa in the editing process, because we changed some words around to make them sound a little more proper. Um, but it was, yeah. I think I got a few comments being like, this is a bit American. I'm like, well, what do you expect? And I try to reach out to a few of my friends who live in the UK, asking them for slang words and stuff like that, because like his POV is he's talking, in a British accent and everything like that, which is a little bit fun to write because in my head he's also British. So
Mhm.
I write it, it's like, hello, Kennedy. So that was a fun part of it. But dual POV, oof, yikes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, that I commend anyone who can do dual POV and do it well, because it can be very difficult. And I didn't even think about that, but yes, he did. I was convinced he was British. Like you said,
Oh,
sometimes it's hard. It is very hard trying to write outside your comfort zone. Right. And especially if, luckily Vanessa was there.
yeah.
And
Thank
so
God.
I know it is. I've done the same thing. I've had to ask friends to help me like translate like something for
Yeah.
French or things like that. So I could at least, so at least there's that authenticity there. So someone doesn't call me out on it later.
Oh, exactly. I agree.
So writing the young adult was way more difficult than like writing a rom-com. Has that have you learned anything while writing like faux real? Like, did you take anything away from that and said, okay, this process did not work? Because sometimes it's trial and error as a writer, right?
Because I wrote dual POV before, and I told
Mhm.
myself I'm never going to write it again. And then I wrote for real. So my takeaway from writing for real is that I'm never going to write YA again, and I'm never going to write dual POV again. But, in 2 years from now, I'm going to listen to this podcast, and while I'm writing a dual POV YA book, because I never listened to my own, like, there's things you tell yourself as a writer, like, hey, this doesn't work, but then you're going to do it anyways, because I don't know. There's no process. It's all chaos.
Mhm. That's
Sometimes it
true.
works, sometimes it what like sometimes things like I would listen to like a specific playlist when I'm writing, and that was my playlist. And then suddenly one day I was listening to it and I just was not inspired at all. And suddenly my entire, you know, my entire writing world was falling apart because my playlist was no longer inspiring me. So I'm
Mhm.
choosing to not put restrictions on things.
Smart.
And so even if in for real it was difficult to write YA, and I'm saying I'm never going to write it, I kind of have a fantasy YA book in my head, and so I'm trying to push it really, really, really far back, but you never know. And I think whatever you're kind of inspired to write in the moment and at the time is what you should write. And being able to get over these hurdles of, okay, well, writing a 17-year-old was really difficult, but at the same time, it made it like transferred to writing a 27-year-old, right? Where like if you have flashbacks to that, to being younger, then you're able to
Mm.
encapsulate those emotions better. So there's a lot of overlap, I think.
No,
And at the end of the day, you're writing people falling in love, right? So it's still an amazing feeling.
it is. It is. And sometimes I know as writers, we kind of get hung up on the details, but in the end of the day, you are writing these two characters, right? Having their happily ever after, or getting to, or getting some form of that, right? For now,
Yeah,
at least.
exactly.
Going back to kind of with both the Ink series, which is contemporary urban office romance, like we mentioned, and Faux Real, which is kind of the YA slow burn, you have a really great knack for writing and integrating humor. So like was that something that's always come naturally to you, or something you love to kind of add that spice to your writing?
Well, as someone who's just a naturally hilarious human being, no, okay. It just I can't help it. I really I can't help it. I think because life's funny and you should laugh. And I like for Company Inc., I always say it's a rom-com. And even for real, even though there's like difficult um topics brought up, I would say that it's a rom-com. And Against the Odds and Asher Complex, so I'm like, these are all rom-coms, so I would not be able to write a book, I don't think, without humor. Even my dark romances that I'm working on right now, Milo, which is on Wattpad,
Mhm.
that has humor in it. And it's a dark romance with humor. So I'm like, okay, I'm breaking the glass ceiling where dark romance can't make you laugh, but we're going to be laughing here, folks, because it just adds I think it adds a little humanity to a book. Because, you everyone I know has made me laugh at some point in my life. So without having jokes and humor and banter, I think that's, especially for romance, I think that's what kind of reels readers in, right? You
Mhm.
just get to see this back and forth, and it's exciting to watch. It's like a game of tennis, and it's my favorite part of writing, is just getting that flirty banter.
Yeah, the banter is some of the best parts, really,
Oh,
for me
oh,
reading. Yeah, like the romance novels, they're really great. And then Ink series too. There's a really good balance there between some of those more dramatic moments,
yeah,
the heat moments, and then the humor. And I think you're right. I like when there's kind of levels there to everything. Like you have the humor, but you also have the dramatic moments. And then you also have the dark moment, of course, that always comes in a
yeah.
romance novel. And that, and that's something you kind of integrated really well. And I always love kind of hearing like, is that something they were always surrounded with? They always kind of had that humor, because I know some people too, like who are very humorous in their books, and they're humorous too in person. And that's something they just always grew up around. So
Yeah.
like they had humor in their family. So
My mom is not very funny. Sorry, mom.
really?
No,
Oh.
no, not really. She doesn't really get a lot of my jokes. Um, but I remember taking a career aptitude test in high school,
Mhm.
and my Eastern European mother was very disappointed when I came home, and it said my number one career choice should be comedian. And she was like, "You did the test wrong." I'm like, "Hey, there's no wrong way of doing this." And she's like, "Well, nope." So yeah, humor is always really fun to add. Um, in Company Inc., I think the entire book is fairly light. Even the dark moments aren't. It's not soul crushing darkness. It's
Mhm.
I always like to say it's like a nice beach read, right? Or like a vacation book you can read. That's time you can read it really fast.
It is, and I would completely agree with you with that, because it was a very easy read, and like you said, very light, because I kind of went into it not knowing what to expect, especially knowing your previous work like Milo. So I was
Yeah,
kind of like I was bracing myself, girl. I was bracing myself because I was just like,
yeah,
ooh, is this going to be a hard one? So like I started reading it, and I was just like, it's like, and before I knew it, I was on the last page. I was just like, but wait a minute, there's got to be more. And there is a book too, everybody. So don't worry.
yeah,
Once you
yeah.
get
Oh,
through.
I know. Leave those good reviews at a good read reviews where they're like, it's a cliffhanger, and I'm like, there's a second book. Can you calm
There,
down?
yes. So it is a duology. There are two books in the series, and it is a very like lighter read, very fun, very engaging. So like if you go from like Milo, don't expect to
No,
go from
no.
something like that to
Yeah.
Company Inc. So
Yeah, I think since I'm new to writing, I was like, hey, what do I like writing? Do I like writing
mm,
rom-coms? I'm like, let's try that. I'm
okay.
like, a YA, let's try that. Dark romance, sure, let's try that. So Company Inc. It's I think there are like scenes there that are sexy, but it's not a steamy book, right? There's not
Mhm.
like explicit sex scenes in it. But for the first, which is disappointing to many of people, but in the first book, there was actually really no opportunities for them to really even kind of do it, like it was there's no like fade to black people. I didn't, cheat you or anything. There was just not a lot. But I still think it's a sexy book. Like I would still say that, it gives you those the butterflies and
Yeah.
right.
Oh,
So
it gets hot, everyone. Don't take
yeah,
make no mistake there. It does
yeah,
get heated, but I'm with you. I actually feel like upped the stakes a bit, right?
yeah,
Between her two choices of like
exactly.
Blake and Adrian, because otherwise I don't know. And I think in a lot of readers' heads, I know that's kind of some readers aren't romance readers in particular are very opinionated. They're very vocal about their
Very
wants.
true.
And I think if you get together with one party, it's like, well, they're obviously the one, right?
Exactly.
You're
And
showing favoritism.
exactly 100%. And I know Blake pretty well. And if Cassie were to sleep, like I don't think if she were to sleep with Blake, I don't think Adrian would care. But if she were to sleep with um Adrian, Blake would definitely be like, okay, over it, right? So then like in order to keep the who gets who going, I was like, okay, no one's sleeping with each other. Cassie, your chastity belt is on, girl. You know, that's kind of, I'm like, you can do this. So, and then I kind of looped that into the book that like she's trying not to sleep with either of these people. So it kind of became a joke with her and her friends. And I think it worked out pretty well. And also, not gonna lie, I would have probably written more steamy, explicit scenes if I was comfortable doing it, but I was a baby writer, okay, and I was scared and I didn't know what to do. So then after I finished the Ink series, I was like, I'm gonna write a dark romance. It's gonna be like really sexy. And I had no idea what I was doing either with Milo. That was my first time writing explicit scenes, and it was like it did well. So I guess good, and sex sells. So I guess that's great. But still to this day, if I have to write an explicit scene, it kills me. It's so hard for me. My other writer friends, it's so easy for them. They're like, oh, 1 hour done. And I'm sitting here for like 4 hours looking at synonyms.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, what is another word to use for this? And it's so frustrating. But you know what? I love that people love it, and I like to make people happy. So I'll keep writing sex. But you know, just know that I'm sitting here a little bit upset.
Well, and I know too that I had to, we sometimes me and my other girlfriend writers will go on writing retreats, and we've done that before. So we were like, we'll ask, what's a synonym for, this body part?
Yeah.
We've used this other word too many times, or things like that. It's wild, the conversations you have as a romance writer.
Oh, for sure. And you're kind of like a director of an adult film at this point. You know what I mean? Like you have to like sit there closing your eyes. You're like, okay, and action. You're like, okay, move your ankle that way. Leg goes up this way. Okay, the hair is here. Was she wearing a bra? Take your bra off. Like it's just so much to handle. And then you have to like go to drinks with your girlfriends. They're like, why do you look so frazzled? And I was like, oh,
I was trying to figure out where their hands
the day
were.
I had at work today.
I know, right?
Yeah, it was insane. So
do you feel like in the future you might write more explicit things, or kind of like rein that in?
Sticking from now on, people are getting what they want, just because like if you look at how well my stories did on Wattpad in terms of like reads and rankings, and like my more so rom-com-y books are like, almost at 1,500,000 reads, which is great. It's good. And then Milo's over here at like 12 million, and Milo has sex in it. So, in my head, I was like, okay, well, clearly that's popular. And when I started writing Milo, I literally went into it being like, okay, we're going to get 1 million reads on Wattpad. That's what's going to happen. That I'm going to write a story that's going to do exactly that. I'm like, what tropes do people like? I'm like, what's hot right now? I did a bunch of market research on Wattpad. I was like, okay, mafia, good. I was like, come up with a really good mafia plot. I'm like, sex sells, perfect. What kind of characters do they like? Okay, like a possessive, dominating man. I'm like, I can do that, like Liza style. But so I did my research, and I was like, this is gonna pop off. It's gonna blow up. I'm gonna manifest this, and then it happened.
And then there you go. And then you got Cherry Publishing in your DMs. So, and you mentioned, because Milo is more of a dark romance mafia, like you said. Ink series is more kind of that contemporary office rom-com, and Faux Real is more that slow burn kind of teen angsty YA. Yeah. Is there other subgenres you're looking to kind of maybe explore, or is there a current work in progress you're kind of looking for another subgenre?
So on Wattpad, I'm writing another mafia romance, but this time it's like a mafia queen. It's actually darker than Milo. Not like I wouldn't say it's steamier. I feel like it's steamier with less actual scenes, if that makes sense. It's just darker. But after that, I have a few other works in progress. Like this will be primarily posted on Wattpad. But I have like a motorcycle romance coming up. It's called Darlin', and it's Sons of Anarchy meets Sweet Home Alabama. And it's going to be, it's going to be like a light dark romance is what we'll call it. Those movies like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, where it's kind of, there's action and guns and crime, but it's light. It's a comedy, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think I want it to be more so like that. And then I'm gonna try a billionaire romance because those seem to be popular. I binge watched a lot of Selling Sunset, and I was like, hey, I'm writing about a real estate agent. Like that's just happening. And then I have a sports romance series. But at some point, maybe in a couple of years from now, or 3 or 4, I want to try more of like a Colleen Hoover-esque type of book where I kind of want to make people cry. So that's going to be the goal after I finish everything kind of on my plate. I'm like, okay, I can make people laugh, sure, but I want you to cry. Like I want to break people's hearts at some point. So I don't know what subgenre that is, but tears.
Right. I feel like that should be a whole subgenre actually for writers. It's just tears, because I feel like we, at one point or another, we want to break our readers' hearts, right?
Exactly,
And
right?
make them
I
feel
just
it.
want someone to die and stay dead. Like, that's it.
I want you to be as invested in this as I am, guys. I want you to cry about these characters.
Exactly.
Love them as much as me. And do your characters, I gotta know, do your characters come to you fully formed? Like already as a writer, like you're like, okay, Oliver's definitely British. He's definitely kind of a bad boy type. So like, do you already know the characters by the time you start writing them, or do they kind of come to you later on?
I think I know them pretty well before I even start, the first chapter. Cause like I'll as someone who's not a plotter, plot comes to me as I write, but my characters are just pretty strong in my head from the get-go, which I think makes the plot move forward easier because you kind of know how your characters are going to react to certain things. Um, I do. Okay, so fun fact. So for Company Inc. and for quite a lot of my books, I took the Myers-Briggs personality test in the mindset of Cassie, Adrian, and Blake. So, it's the 16 personalities. So it's a list, it's a 10-minute quiz. And so I had these ideas of these characters in my head already, like how they look like, how they sound like. And I was like, hey, well, how are they going to answer these questions? So I did them for Cassie, Blake, and Adrian. And then it gives you character profile, like it gives you a personality profile. So like right there, you're like, hey, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. And then there's also websites you can go on to be like that show compatibility between different personality types. So like, is Cassie's personality type compatible with Adrian's or with Blake's, and how do they support each other, and what are the pitfalls? So all of that is kind of provided to you already, which makes character development quite easy because it literally lists like, these are your weaknesses. So for Cassie, I was like, yep, that's exactly what I thought. And it was very funny because when I did it for Adrian and Blake, one of the tabs on the 16 personalities thing is career. And it says potential fields of interest for these character types is lawyers. And I was like, well, that's perfect. They're lawyers. Like, wow. I was like, this worked out really, really well. So it was nice. Cassie's the entertainer, by the way, which makes total and utter sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And yeah, that's a great cheat, kind of an easy cheat sheet, kind of
Totally.
yeah, I love that. I love that piece for like any kind of writer to kind of like figure out who their characters are exactly. I talk to writers all the time who say like, oh yeah, my characters talk to me. They tell me, no, this is the scene I want to be in.
For sure. The Myers-Briggs thing is courtesy of my friend Alice, who's also a Wattpad writer, TA fan. So that was not my own brainchild. She was the one who told me that, so I will not take credit for it.
Okay.
But I agree. They do talk to you, and it's very annoying because sometimes you want them to like do one thing and they're not listening to you, and then you just have to slam your computer, just be like, you know what, we'll talk tomorrow, and they still win in the end. So there's really no point in postponing the inevitable.
I know, exactly. They're like children sometimes. You have to corral them.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Vanessa, did you want to say anything?
Yes, definitely. So it's been great, and I just wanted to say it's really wonderful to work with Liza as well because her books are amazing, and Cassie's such a riot. She's such a good laugh, and she's really fun to read. And that's why we reached out to Liza, because her work is so good and so wonderful, and it's been a privilege to work with her and to create the books. And, I love having them on my bookshelf as well. It's like, and For Real is like so beautiful. For Real is actually our first illustrated cover on the English speaking market, like properly, YA and everything. It's so soft and so beautiful, and you just want to keep touching
Pillow. You can sleep on it.
Right, it's so nice. And actually, this is sort of a little sort of tidbit teaser, but For Real is currently in the process of being translated into French. So that's going to come out on the French market later this year. Yeah, I think with Cherry Publishing, we have been around. We're still very new, quite, indie boutique sort of publisher focusing on romance. And what we try to do is find those stories that are sort of, non-toxic, that healthy relationships, real people, real characters, but also, certain romance that's really, really popular and, everyone kind of gravitates towards it. But there's other books that really deserve, and talented writers who really deserve to have their works, out there and for people to read and in front of, and to be out there basically. So yeah, that's what we try to strive to do. So we're always looking for, organic manuscripts and people, so if anyone has any submissions for romance writers, please don't hesitate to send your work in. And we love those stories. Yeah. And just also we're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well. So please don't hesitate to, follow us and, help grow the cherry tree.
So Liza, where can people find your books? How can they connect with you?
So for social media, I'm primarily on Instagram. So they can find me on Instagram at EL Lewis Writes. It looks like Elwis Writes, but it's EL Lewis Writes. And it's the same handle for TikTok as well. They can also connect with me on Wattpad. My username is Liza A. Lewis on Wattpad. And my website is www.ellewiswrites.com, where I have links to all my published stories with Cherry, and that goes to Amazon. So you can find my books on Amazon and KU. And you can find my other stories, like paid, on Wattpad. And a couple of free ones for now, but they will be entering the Paid Stories program later this year. So lots of really fun things happening. So DM me, stay in touch. I love to hear from my readers and fellow writers. If you're listening to this, hit me up so we can cry together. It's better to cry with two people than one, I always say.
Thanks so much to Liza and Vanessa for being part of the podcast. Book recommendations for this episode: Company Inc. by E.L. Lewis and Faux Real by E.L. Lewis. As always, I hope you stay safe and keep writing. Bye!